Right. So thank you. Thank you for joining me to the community festival. We are looking at community and climate change. And before we begin, just so that you are aware that the purpose of the CCA is to transform the practice, transforming impact, and transforming the profession. And in so doing, sending seeds out and needing nutrients. So is looking at if you'd like to donate to the CCA, there is, you can support them going onto their website, going to the funding or the QR code that is there. And if we may honor this agreement that when we talk to each other, we're going to be talking with respect, curiosity, generosity, and collaboratively. So I am excited to start this and to get to know you. So today I am coming from the CCA Africa, and you can see there are so many different chapters all over the world, and it is just such a privilege to come here from South Africa to you. And I look forward to how we are going to move forward. So today I'm looking at, can we use Indigenous wisdom to recode the machine to become regenerative? Or should we just let the machine go? What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to pause the screen share. And I am going to come back to you, and I am going to invite you to just be present with me. It's early morning for some people, it's late at night for others. So welcome into the space. And can we just for a moment take a deep breath in. We just welcome that oxygen into our space, into our lungs, life-giving. As we breathe in again deeply and we breathe out, just to let go of all the tension, of everything that is still calling for your attention, so that we can just be fully present in this space. Be aware of your feet that are on the ground and grounded, connected to the earth, and through the earth with all its energies, we are connected with each other. Just as a forest is interconnected, we are interconnected in this space. So just take a few deep breaths again. And when you're ready, open your eyes and welcome. So first of all, I am going to start with just honoring. I wish to honor, first of all, the living God who has created the beauty, majesty, and diversity of the African continent. To the land who provides us with life, from the coral reef within the ocean to the crags of the mountains, to the shrublands of the Kalahari and the Karoo and the savanna, the forests, and the many diverse sentient beings that we share this land with. I also want to honor and hold space for the elders of the many tribes who have for thousands of years been stewards of this land, especially the first people, the Khoi and the San people, whose artworks that are found currently in caves all over this land. To the activists, to the artists, and to the ancestors, including my own, who came into this land first as settlers and colonizers, who are now grafted into the soil as home. And as a grafted branch, I can never fully own the story and the complexity of this land. However, what I can do with respect is hold space for the many rising voices and stories that need to be heard. And I can hold space to weave knowledge and bring my own unique voice to the world as my own small gift. I'm going to continue sharing again. And I'm going to ask you, please put in the comments, who are you honoring today? Who are you bringing with? Which land are you from? Which people are you bringing along with your story? Or if you would like to, you can unmute and just share if you would prefer.
Colleen, thank you for that question. It's one I always struggle with. Yeah, and I know why. I think as a Brit living in France and I've moved around a bit in Europe, and we just not been brought up with a direct connection, but Viking roots is what I want to say.
Great. Well, thank you for bringing the Viking roots and the British roots. And Britain is a land of so many different interconnections of people. And thank you, German, Celtic, Jewish, and struggling. All right. Laura, thank you. It's okay. No problem. Thank you, Julia, bringing all your ancestors from all the branches of the family tree. And we hold space for your parents. Thank you. Okay, so I am going to continue. There's a Ghanaian proverb that says, until the lion tells the story, the hunter will always be the hero. And the pain of being hunted and having the hunter boast about their conquest has been a source of pain. And it's felt in every part of the fabric of society. In as much as this is all known and should be acknowledged here, I am holding space for that as I am shifting my focus to the future, to hope, right? To remembering beyond the hunt. And in order to be present in a wholeness and healing, we have to first look back. So Professor James Ugude, he tells a Ghanaian folktale about a man and his daughter. The man is staring intently into the past, and his daughter turns to him and says, "Oh, Father, you're always looking back in the past. Why?" And he turns to her and he says, "My daughter, the answers of the future reside in the past, and that is why knowledge that has been banished into the past find relevance. That is where they find relevance. Therefore, today, we're looking at the past to find the answer for our current generation. If we look at the indigenous, if we look at indigenous knowledge, it is all over the world. Every continent, every group has its indigenous knowledge. And I'm not going to even try and bring them all together, but they all have the same root. They all have the same root, and that is the collective respect of humans, being interconnected with nature, value systems of family, and where we come from. So today I'm going to look at Ubuntu. First asking, is Ubuntu the answer? So the proverb is umuntu, ngumuntu, ngabuntu, which means a person is a person through other people. It's reimagining a society for the future, looking at a value system of life. And in South Africa, we've enshrined it into our constitution. The constitutional court is the highest court of our land, and Ubuntu runs through that. It was even used by Archbishop Desmond Tutu at the time of apartheid, of shifting. He was using that principle to reach back into the past, to find a value system for forgiveness, redress, restorative justice, and healing. It's how we are all connected. It's a spiritual practice. It's an all-body thing. It's community. It's culture. It's society. Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama were best friends. And it was through Ubuntu that they found themselves. Ubuntu is one of the most fundamental aspects of living lives, of courage, compassion, and connection. And Desmond Tutu would say that the idea and practice of Ubuntu is Africa's greatest gift to the world. It's fundamentally a meaning of everything we learn and experience in the world is through our relationship with people. For Nelson Mandela, he said that if we are to accomplish anything in the world, it will be in equal measure to be due to work and achievement of others, not for ourselves. And this is a complete shift from the Western ideology of individualism. In Socrates' time, they talked about waking up the looming crisis and having a choice to act. And there is a gap between knowing and doing. And through Ubuntu, it's about acting, being and acting. And Mother Teresa is a very good example of this. So Ubuntu, the idea, is in every single African language. Slightly different, but the core, the root is exactly the same. It's about human dignity. Every person is of inherent worth. Ubuntu insists that we honor each other's dignity, regardless of status or difference. It's about compassion and empathy. To actively feel and respond to one another's joy and pain by taking on their perspective, we weave deeper bonds of care. And then interdependence and mutuality. No one thrives in isolation. Our well-being is absolutely tied to our community's well-being. If one is starving, we all starve. When one is eating, we should all be eating. It brings us to sharing and generosity of our resources, our material, emotional, spiritual, everything should be shared freely, because generosity rebuilds trust and ensures no one is left wanting. Solidarity and collective. It's a responsibility that we stand together, both in triumph and hardship. It calls us to bear one another's burdens and celebrate one another's gifts. And that brings us to hospitality and inclusion, where strangers are welcomed, voices are invited in, and Ubuntu cultivates a space where everyone belongs and can participate fully. Nelson Mandela talks about, he explains this when he says that in the past, a stranger would walk in to a village and immediately people would host, people would share, people would feed that person. And that is really lost in the world we have. Nelson Mandela also talks about how with Ubuntu, it's not about not having abundance, but about having abundance and being able to share that within the community so everybody has abundance. Talking about dialogue and consensus, decisions are reached through listening circles and respectful exchange, like this one. We are experiencing Ubuntu in the space where true consensus honors all perspectives, not just the loudest. And then moving into forgiveness and reconciliation, as I mentioned with Desmond Tutu, using that of healing broken relationships. This takes precedence over punishment because it restores harmony by acknowledging the harm, forgiving, and rebuilding the trust. Ubuntu is an action, as I said, using Mother Teresa as an example. She didn't just look, she looked and acted. And they aren't just ideals, it's lived every day in how we speak, how we host, how we lead, how we should care. The principle, I am because we are, becomes a practical guide for all human interaction. So the emphasis is on empathy, compassion, togetherness, and trust. It's about, if you're a leader within that, it's about listening deeply, creating belonging, cooperation over competition. So let's first look at the difference between individualism versus individualistic versus the collective, because this is really important. When I spoke about the analogy of the hunter versus the lion, we can use that, and I was using that in a space of colonizer of the whole world, where the Western ideology is about individualism of me, myself, me all the way. I am a self-made person. I don't need anyone. I don't need my parents. I don't need my family. I don't need my neighbors, right? I am a self-made person. And if there is a poor person next to me, sorry for them, right? Versus the individualistic of a human right to have independence, freedom to be self, the ability to develop your own character. If you really consider it, we do live in a collective. We cannot live in isolation. We are connected to our family, to our community, and then greater community, our city, our societies, our countries, and globally. We have peers. If we are academic peers, we have work peers. Gertrude Matze, she does a lot of talking on Ubuntu, and she says that empathy and compassion and connection are the superpowers of every human being. Family first, community second, and if you have to spare something for the world. And in a world that is full of burnout, where people are exhausted and have nothing left, not trying to save the world with nothing left, it's something to really consider and look at. I want you to perhaps consider, who am I? Who is my parent? Who is my family? I'm actually going to put you into breakout rooms, and I'm going to let me just.
Jij klaar, Dion?
I'm going to resume the recording.
That was a very short breakout room.
Yeah, it was very short.
We have a lot to go, don't worry, it's not anyone. But I would love from you to just ask you, what are we gaining from individualism versus the collective? What do you think? Are we gaining anything?
Short-term
centuries.
pride. Short-term
Sorry?
pride.
Short-term pride. Thank you. Anyone else?
It's survival of the fittest.
I climb on top of you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's short-term gain for the individual.
Short-term gain.
Yes. Lungiswa.
I think individualism, a number of people are starting to wake up to how traumatic it can be. I read something that said, where somebody was sharing that they finally realized their sense of hyper independence is actually grief, and they don't know how to be connected, how to be in a collective, how to be vulnerable, how to trust. So yeah.
Almost the trauma response.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you for that. We are interconnected. Nature is in us, we are in nature. If you look at physiology and anatomy, you know that we are creatures of energy. And we mimic the environment we're around in, and we were created for. You cannot divorce us from nature. If you divorce us from nature, you divorce us from humanity. And that's a similar thing of when we dehumanize others, we dehumanize ourselves. We are the only being that will kill and destroy our environment, thinking that we are making ourselves more valuable, right? If you look at the bee, when the bee disappears, we will have no food. We are destroying, using pesticides and destroying the environment of the very being that are actually creating our food. And that's why when you look at it shifting, we are interconnected. And Ubuntu shares how we're interconnected. Ubuntu is not just human to human, but it's human to nature, human to the world. It's not above, it is serving. It is working within. And there are a lot of frameworks that are shifting, like from the eco to serving, but it is slow because we're still stuck in that a space of me, myself, and I. So I'm going to put you back again very quickly because we have a long way still to go. Where do you experience Ubuntu in your life? So I am quickly going to open all the rooms, and really you have a minute each, and then we come back.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
Sorry,
Right, everyone.
Earlier.
No problem. No problem. Right, everybody, welcome back. And the same question could also be asked of how can we? There are elements of Ubuntu in every space. So how can we then add Ubuntu still back in our lives? So the next thing we're going to be looking at is the inner development goals, because they are deeply aligned with Ubuntu. The IDGs are the inner work that enables the human to shift from individualism towards interdependence. If you think about the inner development goals were created to ensure that the sustainable development goals were able to actually exist and happen. And the problem is that because of our Western ideology, we've not been able to do that. But Ubuntu has been living these for centuries. It calls us to become the kind of people who are able to meet the future needs, to being present and grounded, for being wise and systemic, as in thinking, and compassionate and courageous, which is relating and acting. Ubuntu is actually the inner development goals in action. It shapes character. It nurtures empathy. It expands our sense of self to include community, nature, and spirit. When I have to admit that I am not sure where I found this figure, this looking at the inner development goals in infinity, but it just fits so well that I added it here. If you know where it comes from, please let me know so I can add that in. But when you look at it, self is thinking and being. But relating, you have to relate with others. You have to collaborate with others. You have to act with others. So when you look at this slide and you look at this table, you can see how Ubuntu actually, or the inner development goals, are actually Ubuntu in action. The being, relationship to self. Ubuntu says, I am because we are. It encourages deep awareness, but not in isolation. Because your identity is shaped through connection to others. And what does it teach? It teaches the inner calm, because you know that you're never truly alone. Your integrity is rooted in the idea that harming others is also harming yourself. And it ties in a sense of purpose that's tied into community well-being, not just individual success. And that mirrors inner development goals of presence, self-awareness, and inner compass. Thinking, the cognitive skill. Ubuntu encourages wisdom over intellect and collective reasoning over individual domination. It encourages long-term communal thinking. And it brings about contextual awareness. Every action is seen in relation to others. And it allows you the curiosity of other people's perspectives. Someone who speaks on Ubuntu was sharing that the missing piece in Africa is actually knowledge. And I would agree with that. That through Ubuntu, we have compassion, we have collective, we have so much to offer. If we can bring the world's knowledge and weave it back in through our societies, our knowledge, our wisdom, we have so much that we can do and offer. We have a whole. It's about relating, caring for others in the world, which is also Ubuntu's core. It's about connectedness, humility, empathy, compassion, and collaborating. It's relational. It's not about control or hierarchy, but listening deeply, creating belonging, cooperation over competition, and coming back to finding the consensus. And we see this in organizations where people don't understand the Ubuntu philosophy. And when people say, but what about me with my voice? It actually leads to burnout, because as human beings, we were created for community. Think about acting, driving change. It's not a passive love. Ubuntu is not passive. It's acting with responsibility. You see that there are people hungry, you feed them. You have food, they don't. How do we feed each other? You see children who need school shoes, we find a way. Your actions affect the whole. And true leadership means caring for others' well-being. And I'm going to bring that in when we look at regenerative leadership, because you can see how they all weave together. They come from different places, but they are actually leading to the same place. So what has happened? I don't need to tell you about the poly crisis. I don't need to tell you what is happening, how our coral reefs are bleached, how we have climate warming and what that does. Those of you who live near glaciers, you know that those glaciers have almost disappeared. I've added here, Zapiro is a cartoonist from South Africa and is brilliant in his eye. But Southern Africa is actually seen as a place that is going to be one of the most hit, and yet it has added the least to the poly crisis. Also just want to add where we are and why that is a problem. So when you look at where we are, conventional wisdom, and we're going right back there very quickly. Conventional wisdom is staying within the law, but it's degenerative. It's about extraction. It's about destruction, burnout, depletion. And yet this is where we want to stay. So we then talk about going green, but green is only less negative. So we talked about sustainability. Everyone's talking about sustainability. In the G20 summit that is coming, there is a sustainability program to see how do we get this, but it's adding no additional harm. There's 5 years before 2030, and we've already gone beyond that. So what should we do? Restore things, but that's still humans doing things to nature, not doing things as nature. And that is why the regenerative agriculture, regenerative leadership, regenerative coaching, regenerative way of being is actually Ubuntu is so important. So what is regenerative leadership? It's a holistic, life-affirming approach to leading, one that aligns with the rhythms of nature. It honors interconnectedness, invites deep inner and outer transformation, and unlike traditional leadership that focuses on controlled efficiency and short-term gains, it's about cultivating conditions where people, systems, and the planet can thrive together. There's a reason I used ChatGPT, because regenerative leadership and all the information and the research is rapidly shifting. And by using ChatGPT, I was able to then find the best summary of that. So for today's leaders, we need them to be regenerative. That means regenerating relationships, ecosystems, cultures, and themselves. And that's where Ubuntu provides a blueprint. It teaches that leadership is not just about control, but about care, not being about ego, but about essence. So not power over, but power with. So how does that play out? What are the principles of regenerative leadership that are needed for us to move forward? So first of all, it's living systems thinking, not just systems thinking, because organizations are not machines. They are living, dynamic systems. Regenerative leaders should be able to see patterns, relationships, and interdependencies rather than the silos and control points. Leadership should become less about fixing and more about tending and stewarding wholeness. Then you have inner development as the root of outer change. What does that mean? Well, it means that the regenerative leadership starts with the inner landscape, self-awareness, values, emotional maturity. It honors the truth that you can't lead others beyond where you've led yourself. Hence, inner development goals. Hence, regenerative leadership coaching. Practices like mindfulness, reflection, shadow work, the inner critic, and nervous system regulation are really important in this. So what's more? So you have evolutionary purpose, not just about profit. It's about looking at donut economies, circular economies. It's about serving life, putting the earth as a stakeholder in the boardroom. It aligns around living purpose that evolves over time. And this principle invites the ongoing inquiry of what is wanting to emerge through us versus what we want to emerge, finding where the energy is, being in right relationship, into being in a place where life flourishes, focusing on building cultures of trust, of dignity, reciprocity. And then the leader's role becomes a cultivator, cultivating right relationship with self, others, the earth. And it's like becoming a gardener, because in organizations, there is rhythm, season, there's cyclic thinking. And what the machine wants you to do is to be in summer all the time. But what regenerative leadership is about following the rhythms of nature. There's rest, there's growth, there's also decay. You might have to compost a department, compost a project, and then about renewal. What comes after that? Productivity isn't constant, it's pulsed. Regenerative leaders honor natural cycles of that reflection, that pause, the creativity and action. About wholeness and integration, bringing our whole selves, mind, heart, body, and spirit. And again, this is why we have such huge burnout statistics of people who are angry at work, people who are anxious all the time, because we're not allowed to bring our whole selves to work. It's about integrating intuition with intelligence, or with metrics, with meaning, logic, with love, combining everything together. It's about well-being, purpose, and performance that are not separate, but rather intertwined. And being able to understand your place where you are embedded, be aware of the context. And when we look at global organizations who have got everything the same, it becomes a problem, because they are become tone deaf, the context of looking at the gift of place. What does the system need from me to thrive? What can I learn from the context, from its story, from the culture, so that solutions are grown and not imposed? So regeneration isn't a blueprint, it's a living process. It doesn't happen overnight. And it helps leaders build adaptive systems, resilience within the system that can learn, evolve, and respond. And that uncertainty is not feared, but rather it just becomes part of the process. I'm going to now put you back into rooms, and I'm going to ask you, I'm going to give you only 4 minutes to just ask you what pattern is emerging for you out of what we have talked about. Let me just, I'm going to pause the share, and I'm going to put you back into breakout rooms. You might go to different, into different rooms. All right. 3 minutes. 4 minutes. Yes, that's right. Welcome back, everybody. How was that conversation? Would anyone like to share?
Short. Sorry.
Unfortunately, it's only an hour, but
I'm kidding.
perhaps we can do that more.
We should. That's exactly what Anna B and I were saying, is that, you know, in order to start seeing a change, we have to keep talking about it, but not just talking, but also doing. We have to make it more mainstream. You know, for those who are not waking up to this new narrative, the more people like us share and meet and change and do, the more it's going to become a a lot less scary and a lot more normalized, and people will start seeing a different vision than what they're stuck in now. Thanks, Anna B. Yeah, that was our short conversation. It's so important for us to speak to all different age levels, demographics, and make this more of a narrative that we speak about every day, not just from time to time.
Thank you. Thank you. Who else would like to share?
Yeah, I'd just like to add something that I was enjoying listening to Lungi about her being referred to now by her friends and colleagues as being in midlife, and she's in her early 40s and I'm 68, but we're both in our midlife. So just wanted to add that. I was going to say that to her in our conversation, but I think we need to be mindful of that sort of being boxed in sort of these traditional views of the stages of life. You know, you can have young people who are incredibly wise, and you can have old people who are incredibly, what should I say, unwise.
Right.
And it's really about your personal development, you know, where you've got to, also what you've inherited. So that I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's part of the pattern. Right, anyone else like to share something?
Sorry, Lungi, I didn't want to stop your discussion.
So from our
No,
side,
that's fine.
okay. So thank you very much, Colleen. This is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful presentation. I hope there will be a repeat if there's something like that. So in our team, we spoke about the fact that there is a lot of talk and not enough action. And I shared, my share was about, I like the way you have woven together Ubuntu, IDGs, and regenerative leadership, but using Ubuntu as the foundation. So I was with Laura in the breakout room, and I was saying to her, actually, Colleen has reminded me that I'm an African and I'm proud to be an African. And maybe my religion is Ubuntu. And there's a lot that we can take to the world as Africa, as a gift. So that was our share. So Laura was concerned about the fact that there's a lot of talk and not enough action. So I think, and Julia also emphasized that we need to do more rather than talking. And Ubuntu is already about that. It's about action. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Lungiso, is there something you wanted to add? No. Okay. Right. Well, thank you, everybody. It sounds like it was rich discussion. And what I'm hoping for is, as Lindelwa, you were talking about how the pattern's already there, using Ubuntu as a foundation, instead of looking and praising a machine and seeing ourselves as demigods, to actually work towards being with nature and as nature. And how can that shift within a machine? Because right now we are in a machine. And so I want to just take a few moments to just look at the machine. Can we recode the machine? Are we able to shift from machine-like principles to regenerative principles? What would that take? What would we need to do? And so if we did that, it would be looking at the current coding of business is linear, it's optimized, it's scalable at all costs. But if we recoded it into more regenerative space, it's a living system, it's dynamic, interdependent, relational. It takes a shift of mindset to see an organization as an ecosystem where every person, team, process is part of the web of the ecosystem. That growth isn't just about output, but it's also about health, harmony, resilience. And in order to do that, we would need to look, how do we design our organization for emergence? Where in the businesses are we able to cultivate adaptability instead of predictability? And organizations, we know, we learned from COVID, is unless you're adaptable, you're not going to survive. What if we reroute purpose in life-enhancing impact? Right now, the code is maximum profit, whereas the regenerative code is more serving life. If purpose becomes not just the mission status, but actually a living compass for everybody to see the value that everybody is working towards, instead of extracting life, but adding life to people, communities. And to do that, we need to ask the question, who and what do we really serve? Is our value creation in regenerative or extractive? We already, if we look at leadership, it is being redesigned for stewardship, shifting away from top-down control, performance-driven, ego-based influence. And we can see that in the world today. It's going back to that, the far right, fascism, totalitarianism. Forgive my speaking, right? But towards stewardship, but not just stewardship, facilitation and inner development of the leader, becoming a space holder that nurtures potential, working with the unseen of culture, energy, and systems health. When we look at our leaders of how they are burnt out, instead we should be looking at resourcing our leaders so they can lead from wholeness. So it's looking at then, how do we shift from power over to power with? When we're looking at building cultures of interbeing, that is Ubuntu. It's shifting from individualism, competition, silos, to connection. That's not soft, it's structural, it's Ubuntu. Creating that environment that rewards collaboration, empathy, shared learning, emotional safety. And think about organizations currently, we have a big issue with psychological safety. We are reinforcing separation. Our rituals and rhythms are keeping us apart rather than connecting us. How do we embed cycles of renewal? And when you look at the machine today, we're looking at constant output, hyperproductivity, burnout. Whereas if we wanted to bring it and become more regenerative, we have to look at the pulse, the rhythm, enabling rest, reflection. If we think of nature, it doesn't produce entropy. It pauses, it composts, it renews. And that's what we have to look at as well. We've talked about the inner development goals. What if they became more of our core competencies and part of our KPI? We see people as resources, sacred beings. And I'm going to shift quickly because our time is running out. But I just want to say the machine isn't broken. It was meant to be a machine. It was never built for life, but we are meant for life. And right now I read an article called The Rise of End Times Fascism by Naomi Klein and Astra Taylor. And they wrote such a beautiful thing at the end of it. They were saying a story not of end times, but of better times, not of separation and supremacy, but of interdependence and belonging, not of escaping, but staying faithful, the troubled earthly realm in which we are enmeshed and bound, breaking the apocalyptic fever through hope, kindness, community, and togetherness. And what does that mean? Ubuntu. Ubuntu is not just African wisdom, it's human wisdom, and it belongs to all of us to lead with heart and humility, building cultures of belonging, and see ourselves in the eyes of others. Can we heal the planet by healing our relationships with each other and with the earth and with ourselves? Can we face global challenges that no single person or nation can solve alone? And it is only through Ubuntu that we can rise together. So the challenge is, let's start weaving. Instead of seeing IDGs as separate, regenerative leadership as separate, let's see Ubuntu as the foundation of something that we can lead together. So thank you for your time. And if you found this interesting and want to delve deeper, or you'd like me to come and speak or do a workshop, or you're curious about regenerative coaching, please reach out and let me know. So I'm going to come back to this, and I know our time has come to an end, but is there anything you would like to share, any question you would like to ask? And those that need to drop off can drop off. Cheers. Right, any questions, any thoughts? Anything you'd like to share? Anything that popped out and you were like, wow, I hadn't thought of it in that way? What is this talk? What is this talk meant for you?
Can I go?
Please.
Yeah. So, Colleen, I really enjoyed your approach. This concept of weaving these various concepts together, and driving a far more integrated process, and an integrated way of being and thinking. But just to get back to what Julia was saying and the others were saying, is that I think when we speak about these things, we speak from quite a deep sense of knowledge of these issues, where mostly people that I interact with, and particularly in the business community, they're so far from being like this or thinking like this or even doing any elements of it, that I think there's such a vast gap between people who have a sense of it and those who don't, that I think it's very difficult to find the right vehicles and the right bridges to bring those people into this way of thinking, because we don't have too much time. And some people take a lifetime to get to this. And I'm just often thinking that if we could accelerate this kind of thinking amongst the youth, that would be, for me, would be first prize.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think the youth, we have, because of algorithms, such different youth. But majority of our youth are actually thinking in this way already. And I have wondered, perhaps instead of having a bridge that you have to go from one destination to another, what if we recoded? What if we recoded our language that we use in organizations with each other to a more regenerative one? So instead of talking machine talk of throughput, input, output, we talk about seeds, we talk about soil, we talk about, and perhaps that is a way of shifting people quite rapidly, because people are aware right now we're in a time of great change. But thank you.
Yeah.
And perhaps it's an ongoing conversation we can have. So reach out. I'd be very happy to meet with you and we could discuss that. Lindelba. Just unmute.
Yes, thank you. So for me, I do agree with what Chris is saying, but what I've experienced is that when you show up, either as a coach, as a leader with Ubuntu, with this regenerative approach, it's a very fresh approach. And when you act from Ubuntu, people notice, leaders notice, those that interact with you, they do notice. And maybe then the one thing that we must do more of is to do Ubuntu, act from a place of Ubuntu. It will make so much difference, because there's a lot of stress and strain in the corporate environment, in the world, not say the corporate environment. So the more we act with Ubuntu, the more people will be keen to hear out this different, fresh perspective. That's what even in families,
Thank
actually. You. Yeah.
And I think that's where the shift from collective and individual is when we focus on the individual and we lose the Ubuntu, which is actually being human and interacting. And we have created the lie in organizations that it has to be machine knowledge, machine building, machine way, and you don't take your full self. Versus if we saw it as community in action for a particular action, it could shift everything. Thank you. Anyone else like to say anything? Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this talk. I really appreciate it. I honor your time and the knowledge that you brought and how we have been able to weave together. So may you just have a beautiful day, and let's continue weaving together in this conversation. All right.